Assalamu alaikum. This is Sir Salman Akhtar. I'm going to teach AS level economics topic, which is part of macroeconomics AS level syllabus, that is international trade. And we are going to learn today the absolute and comparative advantage theory of international trade. Well, countries usually experience two types of trade, that is domestic and international. Domestic is within the country, and basically the international trade is when a country trades with different countries. For example, Pakistan is trading with China, Russia, United States and all other. Usually international trade also known as multilateral trade. There are multiple difficulties in having an international trade. When a country trades with other countries, communication can be a barrier, cost of transportation and trade barriers from other countries, variation in exchange rate. However, there are some legal procedures and complications from other countries. So these are basically the part of complications in international trade. Why do countries trade with each other, or why do nations trade? Actually, before understanding why do countries trade with each other, we must understand a basic philosophy that every person's skill is different from each other. For example, my specialization in economics and the other one is specialist in mathematics. The way the teacher teaches mathematics, it's not possible that I can teach this other subject in the same way, because my skills, my expertise in economics. So we have different factor endowment. Same with the countries. Few countries are enriched in agriculture, that is primary sector. For example, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Few countries are specialists in technology and manufacturing, that is secondary sector. For example, Japan, Korea. However, few countries are specialists in tertiary sector, that is services, UK and United States. So it is due to the different factor endowment, different of the resources they have available. So if a country try to produce each and everything, it could be diversified or self-sufficient, but it doesn't guarantee that it is specialized in it or not. However, the theory of international trade supports a specialization. The basics of international trade, there are few assumptions, and as an economics student we know that we do take the support of assumptions to simplify the topic or simplify different things. Here in international trade we have few assumptions that I'm saying assumptions because in reality it is not possible. To simplify the topic, we assume that there are only two countries in the world and they both are producing two goods, that is usually food and clothing. However, the transportation cost, that is export import cost, we assume it's zero. There is no tariff, no trade barrier. However, the resources are homogeneous. It means the labor which is producing in country X has the same productivity in country Y. International trade theory depends on absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Let me tell you a brief history of absolute advantage. Absolute advantage is introduced by the father of economics, Sir Adam Smith, in 1760s. Adam Smith portrayed or suggested that a country should specialize in those goods and services it has cost advantage. For example, if country X and Y, they both producing same goods, but country X can produce maximum output or more output of a same good as compared to country Y. It means country X has an absolute advantage or cost advantage on country Y on that particular good. So absolute advantage basically consider the cost advantage, that is cost of production. However, the another school of thought supports comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is introduced by Sir David Ricardo in 1817, and he also suggests that countries should specialize, but there is a difference between a specialization in absolute and a specialization in comparative. Specialization in comparative advantage suggested by David Ricardo that a country should specialize to gain the benefits of international trade on the basis of opportunity cost. For example, Mr. X and Mr. Y, they both are producing tables. If Mr. X is producing one table and the opportunity cost is 5 chair, and Mr. Y is also producing the same quality of table and he is sacrificing 10 chair, it means Mr. X must specialize in tables production as his opportunity cost is less than Mr. Y. This is the basic theory behind comparative advantage. Now you can see that, come back to the absolute advantage, you can easily identify absolute advantage. You don't need to make any calculations and opportunity cost ratios, as I taught you that in absolute advantage there is no opportunity cost ratio. You can just look at the situation at the output of these two countries and you can easily judge which country has absolute advantage in which particular good. For example, if you look at this sketch is showing the production possibilities or output of country X and country Y. However, country X, this is the production possibility of country X. Country X can produce 60 units of food along with 30 units of clothing. With the same resources, country Y produces 20 units of food and 40 units of clothing, which shows that country X has an absolute advantage in food and country Y has an absolute advantage in clothing. Now you can see that according to the absolute advantage, because the output produced by country X in food is greater than country Y. So we can say that country X has an absolute advantage over country Y in food production. However, country Y has more units of clothing as compared to country X. So we can say that country Y has an absolute advantage in producing clothing, as country Y is producing more units of clothing with the same set of resources as compared to country X. Now, before specialization, the situation was like that. Country X food 30 units, 15 units of clothing. With same available resources, country Y is producing 10 units of food and 20 units of clothing. So it shows that country X has an absolute advantage in food and country Y has an absolute advantage in clothing. And the world before specialization is getting 40 units of food and 35 units of clothing. So, according to the Adam Smith theory of absolute advantage, countries should specialize in those goods in which they are more efficient or they have cost advantage. So, according to this theory, now countries will become a specialist in their particular type of good on the basis of cost advantage or efficiency. Now, look at after specialization situation. Now, country X, which was an absolute advantage in food, has become a specialist in food and discontinued the production of clothing. If all the resources which were previously distributed between food and clothing now focus on only food, then due to the specialization, the output of food has doubled. You can see that before specialization it was 30, when the country focused on only one good, now it is producing food. Due to the specialization and all the resources diverted towards this good, the output is double, that is 60. However, country Y did the same thing. It had an absolute advantage in clothing. So it stopped producing food and focus all the resources or divert all the resources toward a good in which it has an absolute advantage, that is clothing. So the output of clothing now doubled as well. So we can easily see that the world gain due to specialization 20 more units of food and 5 more units of clothing. This is the concept behind absolute advantage. I hope it is understood by you and you all have understood what absolute advantage is all about. Let's move on. Absolute advantage, in reality, the world trade is more relying on comparative advantage, because comparative advantage gives you a big picture. We can easily understand by taking an example of Iran. Iran has an absolute advantage in producing oil. But the biggest failure of Iran's economy, or biggest barrier which didn't allow the economy of Iran to be a developed economy, because they are not considering the opportunity cost of focusing or the production of oil. If they are not comparing or considering the opportunity cost of producing oil, their country is far behind the developed economies. So in reality, the world trade is very rarely based on absolute advantage. Even absolute advantage, the rate of exchange is not mutually benefit. One country has a monopoly, so they charge the price whatever they want. So comparative advantage gives us a mutual benefit, that is for the benefit of the both countries. Now you can say that, see that according to this sketch, country X has an absolute advantage in tea as well as coffee. Assume that there is coffee in x-axis. So we can easily find out from the graph that country X has an absolute advantage in tea and coffee. However, the output of country Y in tea and coffee are both below the production possibilities of country X. So we can easily say that country X has an absolute advantage in both goods. But according to the theory of